our first time on YouTube. So, okay, so we are talking today. We're here with Saul Klein. Hey, Saul.
See ya.
The father of technology for realtors, I guess. And I think we're live.
Oh, thanks. I think I'm older than that. That's okay.
I think it's now.
So, okay, so we are talking today. We're here with
Okay, and Rachel Real, broker in Chicago. Hey, Rachel.
Hey, everybody, what's up?
Okay, so let's talk about this story. So, is national reciprocity for agents a good idea?
So I'd like to say, first of all, where that idea came from, and we've talked about this before, is that on July 9th, the president signed an executive order. And it had many things. And we've actually talked about one of the items in that order has to do with antitrust. Well,
Right.
Bernice Ross, in an article in Inman, she pulled out a specific point that has to do with, it ended up being about the possibility of reciprocity,
Right.
but it's really who regulates licensing and and she added then the educational components behind licensing. And is the federal government getting ready to eliminate, right? That was that one piece that she pulled out.
Right.
And so you want to talk about just that piece? I have it's interesting that, and you might remember this, Rachel, that people have been talking about licensing being really a state monopoly for years. What happens is you go get your license, and people in real estate will complain that they don't learn anything in the licensing. I disagree, but they'll complain they don't learn anything in the licensing class, that they use it.
We actually did a whole podcast,
but they still have to do it. They still have to pay it. And really, when they get the license, it's a monopoly. It's a state-run monopoly, and it doesn't guarantee that that person's any better than somebody that doesn't have. So there's this is an old conversation.
Right.
And it's about, is license. And we used to have these conversations about continuing education. John Riley and I have always felt that continuing education is a waste. Before there was continuing education, we took classes because we wanted to, and there were classes that taught us something, and there was value. And that, what happened when they instituted continuing education, what became important was not what they learned in class, but did you get CE credit?
Oh my
God! So that
God.
kind of defeated for us as educators, the whole purpose of this. Now, if you look at this executive order, and this is really important because Bernice is right, that a possibility could be, and remember we talk about this, what's currently possible in your business, and if it were impossible, or what's currently impossible, and if it were possible, it would fundamentally change the way you do business. What if licensing wasn't required anymore?
Oh, good Lord.
Well, but even just I mean, that is definitely, I mean, that happens though in other countries all the time. Licensing is
other countries many don't even have, right?
Mexico, it's not required, even if that's right there.
And if the government deems that the current system is actually anti-consumer, and this is an executive order, so people have to go back and understand how powerful executive orders are, right? Remember when President Obama was president, I guess a lot of presidents, they say, well, Congress doesn't cooperate with me, so I'm going to run by the pen. Executive. So when the president signs an executive order, that's just as good as law, as long as that person.
So let me back up. So the article in Inman was about national reciprocity. So basically saying that it's basically it's not a national license, it's not a state license, but it's all reciprocal. So as an agent, like Rachel and I and you, if we were going to go get our license in a different state, we wouldn't have to basically start the whole thing over. We would just take maybe the law portion or something like that.
Take the state-specific portion and not have to take the whole class all over.
Not the national stuff.
Well, in California, that's the way it's always been. You take a national exam and you take a California exam to become a broker. You take them together. Now, but again, what she was referring to is an executive order, which doesn't say we're going to come after, and this is exactly what the government's going to do. It says that the FTC and the DOJ need to give this high priority and look for where these types of things inhibit commerce or are antitrust or anti-competitive. And in many cases that you can make a case for, it's anti-competitive if you have to get a license every place that you travel to. And currently, well, I mean, read Bernice's article. She makes a case for, and there are states, and she outlines it, where there is reciprocity.
Well, in
Right.
Ohio and Kentucky, because I'm licensed in both, if I got my Ohio license, then in order to get Kentucky, I just had to take the law. That was back before, I think last year it changed. But if I was licensed in Kentucky, I would have to redo everything for Ohio. There was no reciprocity going the other way. But let me ask you, did Biden actually sign this? Or is it just up for signature?
No. So it's an executive order. And that's why you have to go read the executive order. It says, I'm directing so remember that the federal government, the executive branch, has great power. It has the Federal Trade Commission. Well, start out with the DOJ. That's the prosecutor.
Right.
You ever watch Law and Order? And they got the prosecutor guy. So the prosecutor, but you got to have somebody go out and collect your data. That's the FBI. They collect it for the prosecutor. The prosecutor is the DOJ. When you get and then who enforces for the prosecutor? The Federal Trade Commission.
Right.
And then there's another enforcer, that's the IRS. So the federal government, the president is in charge of the executive branch and says to his branches, and that's what this is. It kind of lays out, this is what I want all my branches to do. I want you to look for antitrust. I want you to look for where this interferes.
This is like one of the ways that they're saying, is this antitrust?
Or is this in the way of, empowering consumers, or does it not empower consumers?
But by this, they mean a state-specific license, and anytime you move to a new state, having to take the entire course as though you've never been licensed, right? That's
right. I think that's part of it too, is that they were referencing the fact that if this were the case, then if there were no reciprocity, then if I were to go to California, I'd have to take the whole class over again, which then essentially only benefits the companies that do the education. They're the ones just continually raking in the money.
I'm looking for the paragraph.
But that doesn't make any sense for people that have been licensed for years. If I want to go to Ohio, why am I taking the whole entire course all over again?
Just because you're licensed for years doesn't mean you know what you're doing.
No, but at least you've taken, like Saul said too, in Illinois, it's the same way. I go sit for the exam and there's two portions. There's a federal and a state portion. And I can pass the federal portion, but maybe not pass the state portion. And then that's, if I have to go back, that's the only portion I have to do. Okay. So, I mean, really, if I go to Ohio or Kentucky or any of those other states, I should be able to go in there, take an abbreviated class or something that would allow me just to get that information for that state specific.
I mean, if we're going to fight about that piece, I don't think it shouldn't just be like, are you licensed in each state? Then there's an assumption of your ability to help the public at a high level.
Yeah. So again,
even without reciprocity, though, I mean, Jesus, you could look at any state as an example and say, just because there's 40,000 people in the Chicago area that are licensed doesn't mean that they're all equipped to help the public
So what people have to understand, the federal government has policies and procedures and hot buttons and cold buttons, and often that depends on who's in office.
Sure.
And if you look back historically, what you'll find is the real estate industry has always been, in the eyes of the government, anti-competitive. Now, the way in which and who's in office at the time, is it a more pro real estate industry administration that's going to say we're not going to or is it a less? What are the policies that need to be accomplished? And what an executive order, and again, the executive order is very interesting. It's not just real estate. Talk about technology and remember the DOJ broke up AT&T. So they have these great powers. And so this executive order is reinforcing the direction.
Right.
And
a bigger thing.
Yeah. And what could some of the outcomes be? And one could be national reciprocity could be one of the outcomes. We're in a long ways from there.
But then to your point, it's like, what was the question you asked before? Like, what if
what's currently possible, or what's currently possible in your business? Licensing.
Like,
and if it were impossible, it would fundamentally change the way you do business.
Or what if there was a license, but it was like international? But then it's like,
well, see, then now you're into a whole constitutional issue almost, right? What is the state responsible for, and what's the federal government? Now, you could, at this point in time in history, say like interstate commerce and real estate really should be, right? But not when when this first started, there was no licensing prior to like 1906, or the licensing was first enabled for consumer protection.
Okay.
And the licensing isn't saying, okay, now you're an expert in real estate. Licensing is basically the state thinks you know enough of the terms to where you can go out and trip over yourself if you want to, or if you can put a deal together, go ahead, but you know enough of the terminology to do. We're not going to let you work on your own. You got to go work for a broker.
Right.
But so the licensing is like this consumer protection, and what really has built up around it is a whole business of real estate education, which really received a boon when continuing education got thrown onto the table.
Well, and Rachel and I have talked about it a lot, like an apprenticeship program for agents, because it's like, yeah, I mean, you are
similar to a structure of an appraiser, and how an appraiser becomes licensed and then works under someone else for.
And whose responsibility is it, though, to make sure?
Right.
And then it's state regulated. States have their own laws, but the federal government can say, but in areas where it's anti-competitive or it harms the consumer, right? Where it does these kinds of things.
Yeah, it depends on what you want the outcome to be, right? So like, and it depends on your perspective. So if we are all saying like, what is the best for the consumer? To me, it makes sense to have a licensing situation, but coupled with training. But then to your point, Saul, who's responsible for that? And I think we've had the brokers be responsible for it. Well, we've had ourselves be responsible for it under the guise of like the broker, but it's not, how do we judge if it's working or not?
Well, first of all, anything like that you do is setting up a state monopoly. Doesn't matter how you're saying you can't go into business in this area unless you do these things and pay these fees.
Have a limit,
right. And then part of that money that goes to the state, you go to enforce it.
You can still buy and sell. You can wholesale. You can do for sale by owner.
Yeah, there are things where you really get close to the line. In California, it's like 8 or more, or 5 or more. There are certain things where if you do it as a principal, but even if you go beyond some number as a principal, you probably need to be licensed to do it, right? So there are fringe ways to do it, but by and large, most people go ahead and get a real estate license, and that's like getting the
barrier to entry is so low, and then does that diminish the value of having it?
It's kind of like the cab medallions in New York. Remember the cab medallion cost like $500,000 or something, because they only do, it's a monopoly.
Oh.
Right. So, but the state, they say, we'll let as many people get licenses can pass the exam because we charge an exam fee. And we charge an annual licensing fee, and we can pull some money out and set that up for a recovery fund. So if consumers are harmed, there's all kinds of good pieces to this. It's regulatory. It's done. The states control it. So now when we go back to this, should there be reciprocity?
Nationally,
maybe it depends. Maybe there should be reciprocity between Miami and New York, because a lot of people that worked in New York, at least the people I knew years ago, retired in Miami, right? And so, so there might be some
changes so much, though, right?
I don't know, but maybe there are more natural reciprocities,
right?
That makes sense.
Like New York and New Jersey, or like Ohio and Kentucky.
Well, and it's funny because when you talk about reciprocity in Illinois has reciprocity with a state like Florida, but we don't have it with Wisconsin and Indiana, which are super close to. I mean, I could get in the car and drive less than an hour to Wisconsin or Indiana, but we don't have a licensed reciprocity for those.
It'd be interesting to see how many people that you deal with buy in Florida as opposed to Indiana, and if the number is, then say, why is it this way?
Well, and it's funny now, especially with COVID and the aftermath of that, and in Illinois being the state that it is, we have a lot of people now leaving Illinois and going just over the border in both of those states, because the cost of living is less, the taxes are less, all that stuff is less.
Here's the reason, because the people in Indiana don't want the people from Illinois just coming across the border and selling real estate in their territory. And actually, there's a lot of truth to that, which gets to the antitrust issues and licensing being a monopoly. And you can see there's reasons that this stuff kind of worked its way into being the way we do things today.
Do you think overall it's a good or a bad idea, national reciprocity?
I think you should have to learn how to sell real estate in the state where you do business, even though state is an arbitrary thing, right?
So you think
that's California. It's just like they put these boundaries there.
They made it up, man.
Huh?
They made it up.
I know it's just boundaries, but
don't you think that like the world is more going towards like borderless? So as the world like goes towards that, you have a whole host of issues that are going to come up about like taxes and this type of licensing and all this.
Maybe, but I'm not sure I trust the decisions to a larger body or to a matter of fact, when it comes to real estate, I prefer the decisions to be more local.
So then what about a smaller one instead of by state? What if it's by
county by county
or county or however the state is organized?
Once again, it's a monopoly. You're granting someone a monopoly to do business if that's the best way to do things. And by county, because California is a huge state, right? And it's like, well, I could sell real estate anywhere in California. I'm licensed to sell real estate anywhere in California. Would I? I wouldn't. But I'm licensed to.
It's completely different if I go from the suburbs of Chicago to the city of Chicago. There's completely different contracts, different boards, different everything. I don't even like to do business in that area.
Yeah. So what's the intention of these laws, and are they accomplishing what their intentions are?
Exactly. And that's the whole point. Like, what is the perspective of, and then what do we want the outcome to be? And then
it depends on who you are, I think. It depends on who you are. Are you the agent or are you the consumer? There's got to be a fine balance somewhere.
Or are you an educator? Are you a broker? Are you a title company? Are you a lender? All these people that are stakeholders in real estate. And what this executive order is saying, and it says, here's what my administration believes, and we're going to use the full force of government to make sure that this is how these things work. And then you can tie that to the decision of the DOJ to back out of the stipulated proposed stipulation with NAR, because this is a much broader stroke. The executive order by the president. And again, it doesn't say
what happens from here. So like we have the article, we're having the conversation, but like what
I would say the first thing people need to do is go read, and you can put the link up, read the executive order.
Okay.
Understand what the executive order says. And basically it's a direction to the executive branch.
Okay.
Which has, there's legislative law and there's administrative law. And so lots of times when Congress passes a law, they have no idea how it's going to be implemented. It used to be that Congress would work out the details, but they're lazy. They don't do that at all anymore. They pass a law and they shift it to the administrative side of the government, and the federal government then write policies and procedures around what they believe the law should be. And their policies and procedures take precedence.
And so, and it's based on how they feel it should work.
It's how, and when you get a new administration, they might say, you know what, new administration says that's not so important to us. We won't enforce that. Oh, that's very.
They're looking big picture, whereas the administrative rules are a lot more narrowly focused and made by people who aren't selling real estate.
Yeah, look at the executive order. Donate to RPAC.
So first thing, look at the executive order, and then look at the article, and then read, because Bernice's article will make more sense.
When
if you look first at the executive order, right? And then you can read it, go, right?
And I'll put the links in.
Right, then you can reference. And then I certainly believe that people should contribute to RPAC, because if we ever needed a voice in Congress as people who are interested in real estate, we need it now.
So the goal of RPAC is to have our best interest as real estate agents and the consumer of our services. They have our best interest.
Well, we hope so.
Yeah,
we hope so, and we take the good with the bad.
Well, that's been the path. I mean, in general, sure.
Yeah, exactly. So and there's so many issues. Sometimes you end up taking it in the shorts for one you didn't, right? Just because. You can't. I had somebody the other day, I was on a call. He said, well, how come NAR didn't do this? How come NAR didn't do that? And I said, well, you know how RPAC exists? Contributions.
Yeah.
And so they can only do things based on the money that they raise primarily. And so how many realtors, don't give any money to RPAC and complain about what gets accomplished all the time?
I think most of them don't know.
They don't. Well, that's what it is. They don't understand.
So you're borderline, no, you don't think national reciprocity is a good idea. I'm borderline, yes. All right, Rachel, you're a tiebreaker.
No, I think it could serve I think it could be done in a way that it serves everybody. I don't think
Maybe
as agents,
Switzerland.
right, no, but I don't think as agents it's fair to say, hey, if I'm going to go across the street in some places, if you're on the northern border
No,
of
I
Illinois
can
and
walk to
Wisconsin, and I'm
Kentucky.
going to go right,
Yeah.
if you're going to walk to Kentucky, I'm going to walk to Wisconsin. There is no reason that I should have to spend that much time going through an entire course as if I've never been licensed just to continue to do business there. That doesn't make any
Seems
sense.
ridiculous. Oh,
It seems a little over the top.
you're potentially pro.
How about driver's licenses? Should there be is there driver's license reciprocity? I guess there is, huh?
It's it's actually international reciprocity.
Is it?
Yeah, because when I traveled, you can go to AAA and you show them your driver's license, and then I had an international driver's license.
Really?
And I drove a scooter in Thailand.
Look at you.
Anyway, so it is, so it can be done. Interesting, huh?
But is it in the best interest of whose best interest?
It's not in the best interest of the people in Thailand for me to be driving on the wrong side of the
see, there you go. They didn't care about people's safety. They just wanted to get the fee from you.
The fee for you getting the scooter to drive around Thailand.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, Saul, if people wanted to get a hold of you, they wanted to learn more, you're a fountain of information. What is the best way to get a hold of you?
Saul at bettercallsaul.realtor, or they can find me on Facebook, or the Data Advocate is just about there, I think.
Oh, so close.
I'm writing pieces on it every day now.
Yes.
The world is changing. That's the one thing this article points out, is that the world is really changing in ways people haven't thought about before.
Yeah, that's scary. We'll have to talk. We're definitely going to talk about that in upcoming Better Call Sauls. And Rachel, if people have a referral in Chicago or have a question for you, what's the best way to get hold of you?
Absolutely. The best way to reach me is by cell phone at 630-542-8688.
Awesome. And I'm Jennifer Mertland in Ohio and Kentucky, 513-400-1691. All right. Thanks, guys.